Hi there, and welcome to Science Sleep, where quiet curiosity meets peaceful rest. Tonight, we leave the soft blue glow of Earth behind and drift toward a colder, 12, the Finding 4DR, quieter world. A world carved by ancient stone. A world shaped by wind, dust, and time itself. A world that has slept in silence for billions of years. Mars, the red planet. A desert world frozen beneath a thin sky. A place where mountains rise higher than any on Earth, where canyons stretch deeper than any ocean trench, and where dust storms drift like slow-moving ghosts across endless plains of rust and stone. But in this calm journey, we won't explore danger, storms, or isolation. Instead, we settle into the stillness, the quiet breath of a planet where nothing stirs, nothing rushes, and nothing interrupts the soft rhythm of the silent red winds. Up here, the thin atmosphere whispers across vast deserts. Soft dust drifts in gentle currents that have moved for ages. The horizon glows with muted gold where sunlight meets the cold ground. And the entire planet feels paused, resting under a sky the color of pale copper. Tonight, we invite you to drift just above these ancient plains, to glide beside dunes, untouched for millions of years, to float through the calm Martian twilight, where the wind is soft, the light is thin, and silence stretches farther than the eye can see. Up here, every sound is gentle. Every movement is slow. Every breath feels deeper. Mars holds a stillness, unlike any world we know, a quiet so vast, it begins to calm the mind the moment you settle into it. So breathe slowly. Let the red desert loosen your thoughts. Let the thin, whispering winds guide you into softness. Let the calm of a resting planet carry you toward deep, effortless sleep. Welcome to Silent Red Winds, a quiet voyage across the ancient deserts of Mars, and an invitation into deep, peaceful rest. Part 1. Drifting down toward the quiet, red horizon. You drift slowly toward the red planet, held in the silent cradle of interplanetary space as Mars grows larger beneath you with every passing moment. Its disk glows faintly against the dark, a soft sphere of rust-red stone wrapped in a thin, pale pink atmosphere that barely clings to its cold surface. There is no sound here, no rushing winds, no distant engines. Endless quiet of space, accompanied by the slow rhythm of your own breathing. Each inhale feels softer. Each exhale falls deeper. The calm begins to settle inside you as Mars fills your field of view. As you approach, the details sharpen gently without hurry. Wide deserts stretch across the surface like frozen waves of red sand. Darkened patches of ancient volcanic plains lie scattered among lighter dunes, painted in muted shades of copper, ochre, and deep rust. Thin streaks of dust trace delicate patterns across the ground, shifting in slow, silent currents that have traveled for millions of years. There is no rush on this world, no noise. Only the patient movement of dust and the quiet turning of a cold desert planet beneath the sun's distant, pale light. The thin Martian atmosphere glows softly at the edge where sunlight meets the planet. It forms a faint halo, not blue like Earth's, but tinted in gentle shades of peach and rose colors shaped by fine particles of iron-rich dust suspended in the sky. This dust scatters sunlight differently, bending it into warmer hues, soft and muted, giving Mars its familiar rust-red glow even from orbit. You drift closer, feeling the calm deepen inside you as the first textures of the surface come into view. Ridges rise in long, sweeping arcs. Valleys cut through the plains in soft, winding shapes. Craters dot the landscape like ancient, quiet footprints, each one a memory from a time when the solar system was young and violent. But now they lie still, filled with silence and thin layers of drifting dust. The planet feels asleep, a world in deep, ancient rest. And as you descend gently toward it, your mind begins to mirror that stillness. Below, the desert stretches outward in every direction. Broad. On Earth, deserts shift quickly with heat and wind. But here, everything moves slowly, like a planet breathing only once every 1,000 years. The air is too thin for strong gusts, so the winds whisper instead of roar, carrying tiny grains of dust that glide softly across the plains in slow, graceful streams. These are the silent red winds, gentle, patient, ancient. They calm the landscape, smoothing sharp edges, softening ridges, painting the surface with delicate strokes of fine, red sand. Your descent continues, drifting closer to the ground without sound or turbulence. The horizon curves gently around you. The sky is thin, pale, washed in soft pink near the surface and fading into a dusty, golden glow. Above that, the sky darkens quickly into deep, quiet, black. Mars has no thick atmosphere to blur the boundary between day and space, so the transition is sharp and peaceful, dividing warm, dusty light below from the cold silence of the cosmos above. Your body relaxes further as you float inside this calm gradient. The thin air carries no heavy storms, no noise, no rush. It feels like drifting inside a dream of dust and quiet. Every detail is gentle, every movement soft, every breath slower than the one before. As you drop lower, the surface reveals its finer textures, small ripples, etched into the sand, shaped by decades of soft wind. Tiny dunes gather in patterns that stretch for miles. Each grain of dust, a piece of ancient rock broken slowly over time. These sands have traveled across the planet for ages, lifted gently by thin currents and carried in slow drifts until they settle again in new forms. The desert changes, but only quietly, only softly, only at the pace of time itself. Far ahead, the shadow of a large crater becomes clearer. Its rim rises smoothly from the plains, not jagged or harsh, but worn down by countless years of erosion from soft winds and thin air. The interior appears darker, shaded from the sun, a quiet bowl of fine dust that has gathered slowly, layer by layer, like sediment in a peaceful lake. The shadows inside the crater are gentle, toned in deep maroon and muted red, soft enough to calm your gaze. You drift above it without effort. The stillness of the crater pulls your awareness inward like a soft lullaby. There is no movement here except the delicate dance of dust rising slightly in the faint breeze. It feels like watching the slow breath of a resting planet. The land extends outward to the north in long plains of volcanic rock, dark basalt shaped long ago by flowing lava when Mars was warmer and more geologically alive. Those rivers of stone have hardened for billions of years, and now they rest quietly beneath thin layers of dust. The surface appears smooth from above, though in truth, it is rough and scarred from ancient events. But from your drifting path, everything looks peaceful, unified, softened by time and stillness. The light changes slightly as you pass into a region where the sun sits lower in the sky. Long shadows stretch across the plains. Every rock, every dune, every ripple of sand casts a gentle line of darkness that moves slowly with your drift. The shadows grow cooler in color, soft purples and muted browns blending across the red surface. Mars becomes a canvas of calm, earthy tones, painted in the warm, slanting light of a distant afternoon. Your breathing synchronizes naturally with the slow movement of these shadows. Inhale as light spreads across a dune. Exhale as shadow returns. The planet's rhythm becomes your own. You feel your body loosen further, settling into the calm environment like dust settling gently onto ancient stone. Ahead, the landscape begins to rise. Low hills appear, their slopes covered in fine sand, shaped by long, whispering winds. The hills are not steep or jagged, round, worn by time and softened even further by thin blankets of drifting dust. Light glows along their ridges, forming soft lines where the sun brushes each curve. The contrast is subtle, warm, and comforting. You drift above these hills like a feather floating on the calmest breeze. As you rise slightly with the terrain, you begin to see the wide sweep of a massive canyon opening in the distance. Its edges are faint from this height, blending into the red plains. But you recognize the soft outline of an ancient fracture in the crust, one of countless scars left behind from the planet's long geological past. The canyon stretches across the land in quiet stillness, a vast and solemn shape carved slowly by time. You drift toward it without hurry, letting the calm deepen inside you as the day's light softens further. The sun hangs low in the thin sky, appearing smaller and dimmer than it does from Earth. Its light is cooler, softer, filtered by a sky filled with dusty particles. This gives the entire world a warm yet muted glow colors that soothe the senses and quiet the mind. You float through this fading light as if drifting inside a warm, gentle dream. Above you, the sky fades into darker hues, reds turning to plum, to Vedically, plum turning to deep indigo, indigo dissolving into black. The thin atmosphere offers little resistance to the night, so the stars begin to appear early, shining clearly even before the sun has dipped below the horizon. Each star seems steady and calm in the vast darkness. Each one adds to the sense of quiet that surrounds you. Your descent slows further as you approach the edge of the canyon. The air is so thin that it offers almost no resistance, so your movement remains smooth and silent. The canyon reveals its interior gradually. Its walls are layered in soft stripes of red, brown, and muted gold, each layer a record of ancient times when Mars experienced flowing rivers, volcanic eruptions, and cycles of warmth and cold. Now those records lie perfectly still, preserved in the quiet depths of the canyon. You float above them like a gentle observer of history. Far below, shadows deepen within the canyon. They pool in its lowest reaches like cool water, forming dark shapes that calm your gaze. The silence here feels even deeper, more profound, like the silence of a world that has slept for eons. You drift along its rim, watching the layers of stone slide slowly beneath you as the planet continues its slow rotation. Light dims further. The Martian twilight begins the period when the sky glows in soft, blue tones created by fine dust, scattering sunlight. This unique blue glow lies low along the horizon, a gentle contrast to the warm reds of the land. It is faint, delicate, almost magical, and you float inside that contrast, feeling your breath match the slowing pace of the fading day. The red deserts of Mars quiet your mind. The thin winds steady your breath. The stillness of this ancient world reaches inward, calming everything within you. Mars Desert, Sleep Ambience Part 2. Following the silent red winds across the ancient Martian plains, you drift further along the canyon's edge, gliding effortlessly above the layered walls that stretch downward into quiet, ancient shadow. The air is still thin, cold, and delicate, carrying only the faintest traces of movement, a soft breaths of wind that glide through the canyon like quiet ghosts. These gentle winds create subtle trails of dust that rise in slow spirals, glimmering faintly in the fading Martian light. Each spiral turns lazily, as if time itself has slowed to match the calm pulse of this resting world. As you watch the dust drift upward in thin ribbons, your body relaxes even more, settling into the same unhurried rhythm. The far wall of the canyon glows warmly beneath the low sun. Its sediments stack like pages from a book older than every civilization on Earth combined. Reds blend into browns, browns dissolve into muted golds, and pale bands of ancient minerals lie quietly between them. These layers tell a story written in silence, a story of flowing rivers, of volcanic ash settling from distant eruptions, of ice melting slowly under colder skies. But now the story rests, still and undisturbed, waiting patiently beneath thin sheets of drifting dust. Your orbit brings you closer to the canyon floor, though not enough to touch the shadows. The interior stretches like a vast, open chamber carved into the crust of Mars. Boulders lie scattered along the bottom, softened by time and coated in thin layers of red dust. Their shapes are smooth, their edges worn down by millennia of gentle abrasion from the faint winds that whisper through the canyon. It is a landscape shaped not by violence, but by patience, by slowness, by silence. As you glide forward, the canyon widens again into broad plains. The ground rises gently, lifting you back into the open desert. The transition feels natural, effortless, like the slow exhale of a planet settling into evening. New textures emerge across the plains, long ridges shaped by afternoons of faint, cooling winds, and fields of small dunes that ripple outward in perfect patterns. Each dune glows softly, its crest catching the last light of the sun while its lee side fades into deep, calming shadow. The color of the landscape shifts as the light dims. Bright reds soften into dusty rose. Deep oranges melt into pale copper. Shadows stretch widely across the land, painting the plains with cool streaks of lavender and muted gray. The world becomes gentler with the fading of day. Your breathing slows with it. A faint breeze passes beneath you, moving grains of dust in delicate waves. These movements are small, almost imperceptible, but they travel for miles, forming long trails that glide across the terrain like slow rivers of color. The thin atmosphere cannot lift sand the way Earth's air can. So, even the strongest winds here move quietly, spreading dust in soft, whispering flows. The sound is too quiet for your ears to hear, but the motion carries a visual softness that calms the mind deeply. You drift lower, hovering above a stretch of smooth plains known to scientists as ancient lakebeds. Billions of years ago, these basins held water still, cold, and shallow. Now they lie dry and silent, their surfaces coated in fine sediments left behind from an era long gone. These flat expanses reflect the faint light of the sky, creating patches of dusty brightness across the desert. Their smoothness feels soothing, like calm sheets of stone, resting beneath the stars. Rocks scattered across the plains cast long shadows that seem to stretch into infinity. Each shadow moves almost imperceptibly as the planet turns. The slow crawl of those dark shapes relaxes your nerves, guiding your awareness into deeper quiet. Up ahead, the horizon begins to rise into a soft curve. You are approaching the foothills of an ancient volcanic region, where wide slopes arc upward toward extinct summits. These gentle slopes are covered in layers of dust, so thick they look like velvet. The color deepens here, dark red at the base, turning into warm mahogany as the terrain lifts. The gradients are soft and soothing, inviting your gaze to glide along them without effort. The hills themselves are low and wide, their forms shaped not by erosion from water, but by settling dust over millions of calm years. Their silhouettes are rounded and smooth, softened by layer upon layer of drifting sands. As you drift above them, you feel the calm density of their presence, the way their shapes rise slowly and fall gently, creating a landscape designed perfectly for rest. A small whirl of dust forms below a dust devil, but not the loud, violent kind you know from Earth. Mars' dust devils are quieter, calmer, spiraling softly within the thin air. This one lifts only a thin curtain of fine particles, spinning slowly in a graceful, effortless column. The dust dances in muted colors: peach, rust, dusty gold, glowing in the last light before dusk. The motion is gentle enough to lull your thoughts into deeper softness. As the dust devil fades, the plains ahead open again, stretching toward the distant horizon. The sun sinks lower, becoming an orange ember in the hazy Martian sky. Its light turns colder and thinner, bathing the desert in a quiet, reddish gloom that feels peaceful rather than empty. The entire world seems to dim together, as though Mars is preparing to sleep with you. Shadows lengthen further, colors thicken into softer tones. The air cools into deeper stillness. Your breath slows again. Your body feels lighter. Your mind drifts like thin dust carried by the faintest breeze. Small rocks scattered across the desert form patterns shaped by ancient winds. Some cluster in gentle arcs. Others gather in small ridges known as ventifacts, sculpted by the slow brushing of airborne dust. Their surfaces are polished smoothly, their angles softened by time. You drift above them like a silent witness to millions of years of gentle shaping. Up ahead, the terrain rises slightly onto a broad plateau. The edges glow with the last streaks of sunlight. The glow is soft, warm, and steady, like flame filtered through dusty glass. As you pass over the plateau, the sun dips even lower, casting long, calm shadows across the rock. The sky begins to darken more noticeably. The thin atmosphere allows twilight to come quickly, but the colors remain soft as they fade. Pale peach melts into faint lavender. Lavender dissolves into deep blue, and blue begins to fade into the black of early Martian night. Stars appear faster now, more clearly than on Earth. They pierce the thinning light with gentle, steady brilliance. Their presence deepens your calm, anchoring your breath to the slow rhythm of a quiet planet, turning beneath a quiet sky. You drift across the plateau as the first stars grow brighter. The land below settles into a state of perfect stillness, as though the entire desert is holding its breath. You drift with it, wrapped in the ancient silence of a world older than memory. Mars Desert, Sleep Ambience, Part 3, crossing the soft ridges and ancient volcano slopes of the red planet. The light continues to fade as you leave the broad plateau behind, drifting slowly toward a region shaped by long extinct volcanoes whose shadows stretch across the evening desert. These volcanoes once erupted with unimaginable force, sculpting the Martian crust with rivers of lava that hardened into sweeping plains of dark basalt. But all of that happened billions of years ago, when Mars was warmer and more geologically alive. Now the volcanoes sleep under blankets of fine red dust, their slopes softened by ages of silence. Their presence feels ancient and still, like giant guardians resting beneath the thin sky. As you move toward them, your breathing naturally slows, sinking with the deep quiet of this frozen landscape. The nearest slope rises gently, not steep, but wide and gradual, coated in layers of dust that create soft gradients of color. Rust red at the base, dark, muted maroon along the middle, and at the highest, visible reaches, a cooler shade of plum where shadows gather. These slopes have been shaped not by violent erosion, but by slow settling of dust particles, carried for centuries by the thin Martian winds, until they finally choose a quiet place to rest. You drift above these colors, feeling them soothe your senses as they blend seamlessly into one another. Closer to the ground, patterns emerge, long streaks etched into the dust by past winds. Gentle ridges formed where grains gathered in shallow trenches, and scattered stones, half buried beneath layers of fine sediment. Some stones are volcanic, dark and porous. Others are pale remnants of older crust lifted upward long ago. Their surfaces are worn smooth by tiny impacts of wind-blown sand that polish them over millions of calm, patient years. The world here is shaped by slowness, and the slowness itself becomes soothing. Farther upslope, small dunes gather in soft groups. They curve along the ridges like gentle waves frozen in time. Their crests catch the last reddish light from the sinking sun, glowing faintly as the shadows deepen around them. You drift close enough to see the fine grains of dust glimmering like tiny specks of gold as they catch the fading rays. The effect is subtle but reassuring, like watching warm embers glow before settling into stillness. As you glide upward along the slope, the ground transitions into patches of hardened basalt, dark volcanic rock that cooled long before any human eyes existed to see it. The rock has cracked over time, forming patterns that look like calm. Geometric mosaics spread across the surface. Fine dust collects between these cracks, softening the dark stone with lines of muted red. The contrast flows gently beneath you, guiding your eyes along the ancient pathways, carved by cooling lava. Nothing rushes here. DSNTT. Nothing interrupts the gentle stillness. Even your thoughts begin to slow into long, drifting waves. Above the basalt plain, the slope tilts again. The atmosphere thins further, and the colors shift as evening deepens. The sky becomes darker, fading into plum and deep rose near the horizon. Above that, the stars grow brighter by the minute, scattered across the sky like grains of silver dust. The thin Martian air allows the stars to shine with crisp clarity. Their light feels calm and steady, like distant beacons of quiet in the vastness of space. You drift beneath them peacefully, letting their soft glow wash gently into the edges of your awareness. Ahead, the ridge of the volcano rises higher. Though smaller than the massive Olympus Mons on the other side of the planet, this ancient peak still holds a quiet power. Its slopes are layered with cooled lava flows that built upon one another over millions of years. But now the volcano rests, silent and unmoving, covered in dust that softens every edge. It is a sleeping giant, perfectly still under the cold Martian evening. Your breathing stabilizes, deep and slow, as though your body recognizes the calm of this ancient landscape. As you ascend further, the winds become slightly more noticeable, but only slightly. You see them by their effects, not by their sound. Thin veils of dust glide along the slope in soft waves, illuminated faintly by the star of the evening sky. These dust waves shimmer in muted gold and soft copper before dispersing into the thin air. The motion is slow, elegant, and soothing. It feels like watching silk move in water, graceful, weightless, unhurried. These are the silent red winds of Mars, carrying the desert across the land, grain by grain, in an endless, tranquil migration. At the top of the slope, the terrain flattens into a broad volcanic plateau that stretches outward toward the horizon. The surface is smoother here, covered in thin, even layers of dust that glow faintly in the dim light. Small stones lie scattered across the plain, each one casting a long, delicate shadow. The shadows fan out like dark brushstrokes across a canvas of muted red. Your path carries you above these gentle patterns, and they calm you further, drawing your mind into a quiet, drifting state. As twilight deepens, the sun becomes an orange ember resting on the horizon. The Martian atmosphere, thin and dusty, scatters the light into warm hues that linger longer than expected. For a moment, the sky glows in a mixture of peach, rose, and dusty gold, spreading across the volcanic plateau like the softest blanket of color. The light touches every ridge, every grain of dust, every ripple in the ground, with the gentlest warmth. It is a peaceful moment, suspended quietly between day and night. You drift above the plateau as the final light fades. The sun sinks lower, shrinking into a small golden crescent before it disappears completely. The sky begins to shift again, trading warm colors for deeper blues and violets. The stars brighten, the horizon glows faintly with lingering warmth, and the desert prepares for the cold stillness of night. As darkness spreads across the land, the temperature drops sharply, but from your gentle, floating vantage above the surface, the cold feels distant, more visual than physical. You see the ground darken into deeper shades of red and brown, cooling into near black. In some places, shadows blend smoothly together until they become a single, soft layer covering the plains. Only the faintest glimmers of reflected starlight remain on certain stones and patches of frost-catching surface. Your breathing follows the quiet descent into night. Slower, softer, deeper. Every muscle relaxes. Your awareness becomes light and weightless, drifting across the darkened world like dust carried by the gentlest breeze. As your path continues across the volcanic plateau, the landscape becomes even calmer. No sudden rises, no sharp formations, only the smooth expanse of ancient lava flows stretching into the dark. The plateau feels like the quiet roof of a sleeping world, unmoving and steady beneath the star-filled sky. You float through it with no effort, letting the vast stillness wrap itself around your senses. Near the far edge of the plateau, a small cluster of rocks catches your attention. They rise only a little from the surface, but cast long shadows under the brightening starlight. Their shapes are soft, rounded by ages of abrasion. Dust gathers in small pockets between them, forming quiet pools of muted red. There is no movement here. Everything is preserved in silence. It feels like a perfect resting place, a corner of the planet, where time has slowed almost to a stop. Your breath deepens again as you drift above this quiet cluster, letting its stillness sink into your body. Beyond these rocks, the plain drops gently into a new stretch of desert. The faint glow of early night hangs along the distant horizon, outlining the shapes of shallow ridges and tiny dunes. Your path leads you into this next region of calm, the smooth transition easing your mind into even deeper peace. Mars, Desert Sleep Ambience, Part 4, gliding into the red, twilight valleys and the quiet cold of Martian nightfall. The desert opens again as you drift down from the volcanic plateau, descending into a broad region of shallow valleys, shaped by ancient winds and long extinct water channels that once carved faint paths through the Martian crust. These valleys are gentle, their floors smooth and wide, their walls worn down into rounded slopes that fall softly toward the center. There are no sharp cliffs here, no sudden drops, only slow curves, shaped by time and dust, giving the landscape a feeling of quiet continuity. You glide along the upper edges of one valley, watching the ground stretch in long, elegant arcs below you. The fading light makes the contours even softer, draping the terrain in thin layers of shadow that move gradually with the planets turning. The sky above deepens further into the colors of early night. Reds dissolve into violet. Violet melts into indigo. Indigo gives way to black. The stars brighten one by one, each appearing with crisp clarity in the thin air. Their emergence is slow, patient, a quiet procession of lights unfolding across the heavens. As each star appears, your mind relaxes a little more, sinking into the same unhurried rhythm. Below, The valley floor glows softly with the last traces of twilight. Dust reflects the dim light in muted tones of rose and pale copper, giving the ground a subtle shine that feels almost dreamlike. Small dunes run along the valley floor, arranged in long, parallel lines shaped by steady winds that have flowed through this region for centuries. These dunes move, but only slowly, their crests shifting in increments too small for the eye to detect. Yet you can feel the movement. Sense the quiet persistence of the silent red winds that guide the sand across the land, grain by grain. As your drift continues, the valley narrows slightly before widening again into a basin where ancient sediment has collected. The surface here is smoother than anything you've seen so far, as though the dust has settled more thickly in this protected area. Its texture resembles soft velvet under the dim light, a perfectly even sheet of red and brown tones blending together without any sharp transitions. Your gaze rests gently on this smoothness, allowing its calm uniformity to steady your breath. Occasional stones break the surface, their shapes worn down into rounded forms that look almost polished. These stones cast long, thin shadows that stretch across the basin like delicate brushstrokes. The shadows overlap in places, weaving into soft patterns that drift across the desert floor as the planet continues its slow rotation. The entire scene feels like a painting in motion, but the movement is so slow it becomes soothing rather than noticeable. Your path carries you deeper into the valley as the last edge of sunlight disappears completely. The Martian sky enters full evening now, glowing faintly near the horizon, where dust scatters the lingering light into soft, bluish tones. This blue glow is unique to Mars, a phenomenon caused by the way its fine dust particles interact with the low sun, reversing the colors you see at sunset on Earth. Here, sunsets are blue, soft and delicate, like misty twilight. As the glow spreads along the horizon, the desert beneath it becomes a tranquil silhouette, calm and shadowed, like a world settling gently into sleep. You drift through the valleys, quiet, heart, moving as slowly as the desert itself. Your breath matches the faint rise and fall of the land beneath you. Every inhale becomes deeper. Every exhale becomes longer. Your body feels suspended in perfect stillness, as though the Martian evening has reached inside you and softened every last trace of tension. At the valley's far end, the terrain rises again, curving upward into shallow ridges. These ridges form rolling shapes across the darkening landscape, each one catching faint starlight along its crest. The starlight reflects off fine particles of dust, creating tiny sparkling points that shimmer gently like grains of frost. The effect is subtle and calming, drawing your awareness into a state of quiet wonder. You float above the ridges, letting the soft shimmer of dust guide your eyes as it moves with the faint wind. In the distance, the land darkens into deeper shades as the temperature drops sharply. Mars cools quickly at night because its thin atmosphere cannot hold warmth. But from your peaceful vantage above the ground, the cold feels like a visual transformation rather than a physical one. The reds turn to brown, then to charcoal, and finally to near black in the low places where shadows gather the thickest. The shift in color eases your senses, encouraging your mind to drift deeper into the quiet of the forming night. The stars become brighter still, spreading across the sky in dense clusters. Constellations take shape with unusual clarity, each pattern standing out sharply against the black background. You can see even the faint stars that would be lost in Earth's thicker atmosphere. Their combined light creates a delicate silver sheen across the sky, like a calm river flowing overhead. The sight amplifies the sense of vastness, but in a way that soothes rather than overwhelms. It reminds you that you are drifting peacefully between worlds, sheltered in the calm embrace of a sleeping desert planet. A faint breeze stirs below. You can see it by the motion of dust rising in thin sheets, spreading slowly across the valley floor like soft breath drifting over ancient stone. These dust clouds move without sound, flowing gently along the surface before settling again. Their movement is so delicate, it feels almost like watching thoughts dissolve in the quiet space between waking and dreaming. Your mind follows their motion, releasing its grip on any lingering tension. As you rise from the valley and move toward a new stretch of open plains, you see the outline of distant mesas, flat-topped formations shaped over ages by gentle erosion. Their silhouettes are sharp against the starry sky, but their edges soften where dust has gathered. The mesas rise like calm sentinels, silent and steady, giving the landscape a sense of stability and grounding. You drift toward them at an unhurried pace, feeling the weightlessness of the air and the lightness of your thoughts merge into one. The plain around the mesas is scattered with rocks of varying sizes, each half buried in dust. Their distribution is natural, shaped by ancient flows and long-worn ridges. Some rocks shimmer with faint reflections of starlight. Others blend completely into the darkness. The array resembles stars fallen gently onto the ground below, linking the sky above with the desert beneath in a quiet symmetry. This symmetry reflects into your breathing, into the peaceful ease settling over your entire body. As you pass near the largest mesa, the terrain around it dips into shallow ravines carved by ancient water channels. These ravines twist softly, their paths gentle and smooth, shaped not by violence, but by long-forgotten flows that once moved slowly across the Martian surface. Now they are quiet corridors filled with shadow. The darkness inside them feels protective, not threatening, like a cool cave where time rests undisturbed. You drift above one of these ravines, listening to silence, to stillness, to the faint whisper of dust moving far below. The night deepens further, and with it comes the Martian cold. The surface temperature drops rapidly, creating thin layers of frost that begin to form on rocks and shadowed surfaces. These frost patches reflect starlight with a soft 100 baros ender port crystalline shimmer. They glow gently in the darkness, adding a touch of quiet beauty to the desert. Their presence signals the completion of the planet's shift into night, a slow, peaceful transition from warm dust to cool shadow. You watch the frost spreading softly through the ravines and across the plain, settling with the same unhurried pace that defines everything on Mars. The land becomes quieter. The sky becomes darker. Your breathing becomes slower, and your body feels lighter, drifting effortlessly above the silent red winds that shape this ancient world. Mars Desert Sleep, Ambience Part 5. Through frosted plains and the quiet breath of Martian midnight, you continue drifting gently above the darkening plains as the Martian night settles more deeply across the land, wrapping the desert in a blanket of silence, so complete it feels almost sacred. The wind becomes nearly invisible now, its presence revealed only by the occasional stir of fine dust lifting in thin, ghost-like ribbons. These delicate movements shimmer faintly under the growing starlight, then disappear softly as the dust settles again. Your breath follows their rhythm, slow, light, effortless. The frost that began forming in shadows now spreads across the open plain. It appears first as a thin sheen, a faint brightening on stones and ridges, then gradually thickens into soft, crystalline patches that gather at the edges of dunes. Under starlight, these frost crystals glow with pale silver and faint blue tones, illuminating the desert in a quiet radiance that is cooler and gentler than anything seen on Earth. You drift above the frosted surface, watching the glow expand like a silent tide moving across the land. The vastness of the frozen plain brings with it a deep sense of calm. Here, everything is still. Everything is quiet. Every movement is slow enough to soothe the deepest layers of your awareness. As you glide forward, the ground beneath you shifts from muted reds to soft grays, then into nearly white regions where frost has gathered most heavily. The colors blend seamlessly, forming gradients that ease your eyes into relaxation. Small dunes rise and fall in regular intervals, shaped by countless years of soft wind. Their crests gather thin layers of frost that catch the starlight like lines drawn with a silver brush. These shining edges form repeating patterns across the landscape. Calm, plies, P8 plies. Predictable, gentle. The repetition brings a sense of rhythm to the desert, a quiet pulse that settles naturally into your breathing. In the distance, faint wisps of drifting dust rise from a cluster of low hills. The dust glows softly as it catches the light of the Martian moon's tiny, rocky worlds that move quickly across the sky. Phobos appears first, racing overhead in a fast orbit that completes in just a few hours. Its small shape moves silently across the stars, casting a faint, barely perceptible shadow on the desert below. Deimos follows at a slower pace, dimmer and more distant, drifting with the serenity of a lantern floating in the far night. Their motions feel calming, steady, and reassuring, like celestial companions watching over the sleeping world. As you move toward the hills, the terrain shifts again into shallow undulations. The hills rise gently, coated in frost that thickens in the colder air. Their shapes are soft, rounded, and inviting, like frozen waves rolling across a quiet sea. Each hill seems to breathe in its own rhythm, expanding visually as the light touches it, then falling back into shadow. This illusion of movement soothes your thoughts, guiding them into long, calm arcs. A small crater nestles between two of the hills, its edges worn smooth by time. The crater floor is filled with frost, glowing like a pool of dim light beneath the stars. You drift over it slowly, feeling its stillness pass upward into your body like a cool, spreading calm. The air remains silent. No dust moves here. No wind stirs. It is the most peaceful place you have seen so far, a hollow carved into the land where even the faint Martian breeze seems to hold its breath. As your path carries you beyond the crater, you encounter a long stretch of patterned ground. In this region, the soil contracts in the cold of night and expands in the weak warmth of day, creating geometric shapes across the surface. The patterns form gentle polygons, soft-edged, natural, arranged like the slow breathing of the planet itself. Some are large, stretching meters across. Others are small, delicate, and barely visible. Together, they form a quiet mosaic that covers the plain like a textured blanket woven from time and temperature. You drift above these patterns, letting their soft geometry loosen any remaining tension in your mind. As the night deepens further, the stars overhead grow brighter still. The Milky Way stretches across the sky in a wide, speedio and minus eye to the cause, luminous band brighter than you would ever see from Earth, where atmosphere and moisture dim the view. Here, the thin air allows every star, every cluster, every faint glow to shine with sharp clarity. The desert below mirrors this brilliance with frost crystals that reflect and scatter the starlight in tiny, shimmering points. It feels as if you are floating between two skies, one above, one below, both peaceful, both filled with quiet light. The temperature continues to fall, but the cold brings no discomfort. Instead, it creates subtle transformations across the land. Ridges contract slightly, creating faint cracking sounds too quiet for you to hear, but evident in tiny shifts of dust along their surfaces. The cracks glisten with frost, forming bright lines in the darkness. These glowing cracks appear and fade as the night grows colder, each one a delicate signature of the planet, responding to the deep freeze of its thin atmosphere. Your breath becomes quieter. Your thoughts drift more slowly. Every part of your awareness softens. Ahead, a shallow depression stretches across the plain, shaped by ancient winds into smooth curves that resemble the ripples of a frozen lake. Dust has settled thickly in this area, forming a layer so soft and even that it looks like a blanket of powdered snow. Frost collects along the edges, creating a border of shimmering silver. The entire depression glows under the starlight, a peaceful hollow that feels like the perfect resting place for the desert winds. You float above it, letting its stillness settle deep into your chest. Beyond the depression, the terrain rises gently toward a field of scattered rocks. Some are small. Some are massive remnants of ancient eruptions or meteor impacts. All are coated in a mixture of dust and frost, making them appear smooth and quiet. Your path winds between them without sound, your movement guided by the soft pull of the planet's gravity and the silent drift of your descent. In the Forn, Graving 1, the tensions Laun and the Bade. In the 41, the rocks cast long shadows that stretch across the plain, forming dark shapes that blend naturally with the night. These shadows form pathways of darkness that your mind follows without effort, allowing your thoughts to drift deeper into rest. Far in the distance, faint clouds of dust rise again, but they move slowly, gracefully, like low fog drifting across a winter field. These drifting curtains of dust are illuminated lightly by the stars and by the faint reflection from frost-covered ground. The effect is ethereal, soft, ghost-like, mesmerizing. Your breath slows to match their pace. As you approach the far edge of the plain, the landscape transitions once more. The ground becomes smoother, the dunes lower, the frost thicker. It feels as if you are entering the quietest part of the night, a region where even the silent red winds pause and rest. Everything softens, everything cools, everything drifts. You drift with it, weightless and calm, suspended above an ancient world settling into the depths of night. Mars, Desert Sleep Ambience Part 6, across ancient basins and the whisper of subsurface ice. The silent frost-covered plain gradually transitions into a wider region where the land dips into ancient basins created by geological shifts that took place billions of years ago. These basins are vast and shallow, their edges spreading in long, gentle curves that give the landscape the appearance of a frozen sea, quietly resting beneath the starlit sky. The ground here is smoother than the surrounding plains, worn down by eons of drifting dust and the subtle expansion and contraction caused by temperature cycles between day and night. As you drift lower toward the basin's surface, the stillness deepens around you like a soft, enfolding blanket. Frost gathers thicker here, clinging to the ground in delicate sheets that sparkle with faint hints of blue and silver under the cold Martian night. In some areas, the frost forms crystalline patterns that stretch outward like tiny frozen flowers blooming across the desert floor. These patterns shift subtly with the slight changes in temperature, expanding and contracting so quietly that the movement feels more like a gentle heartbeat than a physical process. Your breath synchronizes naturally with the rhythm, easing into deeper stillness. As you float farther across the basin, the surface darkens in places where frost has formed over partially exposed subsurface ice. This ice lies only a few centimeters below the dusty surface in many regions of Mars, remnants of ancient cycles of climate when the poles were more active and water redistributed across the planet. Though hidden, this subsurface ice plays a quiet role in shaping the ground, causing it to crack, shift, and form polygonal patterns that mark its presence. You drift above these geometric shapes, watching their soft outlines curve across the land in calming, natural arrangements. In other parts of the basin, the dust thins enough for subtle hints of the icy ground beneath to show through. These patches glow more brightly than the surrounding frost because the ice beneath reflects more starlight. The result is a landscape scattered with small pools of pale luminescence that seem to breathe with the night. Each glowing patch feels like a calm signal from deep within the planet quiet. Ancient, serene, you float above them as if drifting through a silent constellation laid gently across the desert floor. A faint movement catches your attention near the edge of the basin. Thin curtains of dust rise slightly as the temperature shifts, forming cloud-like veils that drift slowly across the land. The dust moves in graceful waves, lit faintly by the stars and the pale glow of frost. The motion is soft enough to soothe your thoughts, like watching smoke dissolve into the air or mist drifting across a cold morning field. As you watch, your breathing slows even more, guided by the gentle undulation of dust in the thin Martian breeze. You drift toward a region marked by ancient fractures in the crust long, shallow cracks created by the slow cooling and contracting of the ground. These fractures spread outward like delicate branches of a tree, each one filled with frost that shines gently under the night sky. Their pale lines form quiet pathways across the land, guiding your gaze forward with smooth, natural direction. The patterns are beautiful, subtle, and deeply calming. You move along one of these frozen pathways, following its quiet curve toward the darker reaches of the basin. Here, the frost becomes patchy again as the ground shifts into slightly rockier terrain. Small boulders and rounded stones scatter across the area, coated with thin layers of ice that give them a soft, muted sheen. Some stones are volcanic, remnants of past eruptions. Others are fragments from meteorites that landed in ancient times. All have been shaped by millions of years of gentle abrasion from fine airborne dust. Their surfaces reflect starlight in tiny points that shimmer softly as you drift past. Each reflection feels like a tiny pulse of quiet light offered to the night. Deeper into the basin, the land settles into an expanse of patterned ground shaped by freeze-thaw cycles. Every polygon in the surface is smooth-edged, like cells of a frozen organism resting beneath the desert. The frost within each polygon glows faintly, while the darker lines between them create a soothing contrast that enhances the sense of slow, steady rhythm. You drift above these patterns as though floating over a vast, ancient tapestry woven by the planet itself. Your mind follows the patterns, relaxing more deeply with each passing moment. The landscape changes again as you reach a gentle depression within the basin. Here, the frost thickens, creating a soft, white layer that blankets the ground in silence. Underneath this frost lies subsurface ice, extending far down into the soil, a quiet reservoir of frozen water that has remained untouched for millions of years. Its presence cools the surrounding ground, allowing frost to accumulate more easily and creating one of the brightest regions of the nightlit desert. The frost glows like a pale field of stars resting on the ground, echoing the real stars shining overhead. The symmetry between sky and surface brings a deep sense of calm, as if you are drifting between two mirrored worlds of quiet light. You drift lower for a moment, gliding just above the frost. The cold radiating from the surface feels almost like a whisper of air brushing against your awareness. Subtle, gentle, peaceful. The frozen ground emits no sound. No crackling, no shifting, only silent cold resting beneath the thin Martian atmosphere. The quiet is so complete, easing your thoughts into deeper stillness. In the distance, an area of darker terrain signals the edge of the basin. This region contains a mixture of dust-covered rock and hardened soil where frost accumulates less readily. As you glide toward it, the glowing frost behind you fades gradually, leaving patches of muted silver scattered across the plain like distant lanterns. The transition is slow and gentle, easing your senses into a new layer of the desert. The ground here shows evidence of ancient floods, channels carved by water that flowed billions of years ago when Mars had a thicker atmosphere and a warmer climate. These channels twist softly across the land, their edges rounded from long ages of dust deposition. Now they are dry, silent corridors filled with fine sediment that glows faintly under the night sky. The quiet shapes of these ancient waterways bring a sense of stillness rooted in time far beyond memory. You drift along one of the channels, letting its slow curves guide your path forward. Above you, the sky shifts again as faint clouds of high-altitude ice crystals begin to form. These clouds are thin and delicate, appearing only when temperatures drop extremely low. They stretch across the sky like faint, glowing streaks that catch starlight and reflect it softly. Their presence makes the sky feel even larger, even quieter, as if the universe itself has wrapped the planet in a cool, shimmering veil. You float beneath this veil, your breath matching its slow expansion across the heavens. The temperature drops slightly more, causing small patches of ground to shift or release faint puffs of dust that rise briefly before settling again. Each puff is like a quiet exhale from the land itself, a reminder of how alive Mars remains, even in its deep stillness. These subtle releases of dust move gently through the air before dissolving into the night. You drift through them with no resistance, your path and breath remaining soft and slow. Ahead, the basin narrows into a long, gentle valley that opens toward the distant horizon. The valley floor is smoother than the rest of the basin, shaped by ancient flows of ice and dust that once moved slowly through this region. Now it lies quiet and untouched, a serene corridor leading deeper into the desert night. You glide into the valley, embraced by the stillness on all sides. The frost glows faintly behind you. The stars glow brightly above you, and the valley stretches peacefully before you. Every breath becomes slower. Every thought becomes lighter. You drift deeper into the quiet of the Martian night, carried along by the soft presence of the silent red winds. Mars Desert Sleep, Ambience Part 7, into the quiet highlands and the ancient breath of Martian stone. The long valley gradually widens as you drift farther into the heart of the Martian night, opening into a region where the land begins to rise. The transition from basin floor to rising terrain is smooth and gradual, so subtle that you feel as if the planet itself is lifting you upward with no effort required. The ground beneath darkens into deeper shades of brown and muted maroon as frost thins, and the soil becomes more exposed to the cold night air. Each color blends naturally with the next, forming a landscape of soft gradients that calm your eyes and steady your breath. The highlands stretch outward in wide, rolling forms, neither steep nor sharp, but shaped into smooth arcs by billions of years of dust drifting across their surfaces. Ancient rocks protrude from the slopes, their shapes softened by time into rounded silhouettes that rest quietly under the cold starlight. Some of these rocks are remnants of Mars' early crust, older than nearly any stone on Earth. Their deep, silent presence brings a sense of age and continuity to the landscape, grounding your awareness in a calm that reaches far back into planetary history. As you drift higher, the air becomes even thinner, though the difference is only visible in the clarity of the stars overhead. The sky sharpens into a vast field of light, each point shining with steady brilliance. The Milky Way stretches across the darkness like a quiet river flowing from horizon to horizon. Its glow reflects faintly on scattered frost patches, creating the impression that both ground and sky are part of the same peaceful expanse. Your breathing deepens naturally in response to this immense quiet. Below, the terrain reveals patterns where dust has collected in sheltered pockets. These pockets form delicate, wave-like shapes that wind along the slopes in thin, parallel lines. Each line glows softly in the starlight, highlighting the gentle flow of ancient winds that shaped them. The patterns resemble the ripples on a calm lake, or the ridges left behind by slow-moving tides, though here they are created by dust instead of water. Their quiet symmetry draws your thoughts into a smooth, drifting rhythm. Farther up the highland slope, you begin to see patches of exposed bedrock. These areas appear dark and cool under the night sky, showing faint hints of purple where certain minerals reflect the light differently. The surfaces of the rocks are coated with the thinnest layer of frost, just enough to give them a soft, velvety sheen. The frost highlights cracks and fractures within the stone, tracing delicate lines that reveal the rock's long history of expansion, contraction, and slow erosion. These lines appear like thin, glowing threads woven into the rock, adding a sense of quiet elegance to the ancient surface. You drift even higher, passing above a slope scattered with boulders. These boulders vary in size and composition, some volcanic, some sedimentary, some crystalline fragments blasted free by meteor impacts billions of years ago. Every one of them is softened by dust and frost. They cast long shadows across the ground, shadows that merge into one another and create wide pools of darkness between patches of faintly glowing frost. The mixture of shadow and shimmer gives the landscape a dreamlike texture, inviting your breath to slow with each passing second. A faint breeze moves across the highlands now, visible only through the shifting dance of dust near the ground. The dust rises in thin, ribbon-like flows, twisting softly before falling back to the surface. These movements have no sound, no rush, no urgency. They glide with the slow pulse of the night, embodying the quiet patience of the planet. You drift through the faint trails of dust, letting their delicate motion soothe your senses. In the distance, the highlands form a gentle crest that curves against the sky. The crest glows faintly under the scattered starlight, creating a thin, luminous line along the horizon. This line separates the dark land from the even darker sky, but instead of dividing them sharply, it blends them together like two shades of the same quiet stillness. As you approach the crest, the landscape feels both vast and intimate, open in all directions, yet soft enough to make each moment feel close and calm. When you reach the top of the rise, a wide plateau spreads out before you. The plateau is covered in fine dust, undisturbed and perfectly even, except for a few gentle ripples formed by the night wind. Patches of frost remain in shallow depressions, reflecting the starshine in calm, silvery pools. From this elevated position, the horizon curves in every direction, giving you a sense of drifting above the world while still being tied to its silent rhythm. Your breath matches the stillness of the plateau, expanding softly with each inhale. Near the center of the plateau, a cluster of ancient stones rises from the dust. These stones appear to be remnants of an extremely old impact, their edges worn smooth by time. They stand together like quiet sentinels, forming a natural arrangement that resembles a resting circle. Frost gathers thickest in the sheltered spaces between them, creating glowing patches that make the stones seem like they are surrounded by pools of soft, silver light. You drift close to them, feeling the quiet age that radiates from their presence. As you pass over the stone circle, the plateau slopes downward into another shallow valley. This valley is narrower than the basin you crossed earlier, and its sides are covered in thin ridges that run parallel to each other. These ridges were shaped by long cycles of freezing and thawing, uplift and collapse, slow processes that leave the landscape layered in delicate patterns. The ridges glow faintly where frost has collected along their crests. The alternating bands of shadow and light create a gentle visual rhythm that guides your awareness deeper into calm. The valley floor contains darker soil that absorbs more of the night's cold, causing frost to form in intricate patterns. Some of these frost shapes resemble feathery branches, while others form circular clusters that look like frozen blossoms. The formations expand and contract with the temperature, though their movements are too slow to see. Still, you sense that the valley is quietly alive with these tiny natural rhythms. The calm of the moment deepens. As the valley widens, you reach a region where the surface becomes smoother again. Here, ancient lava flows, once moved across the land in slow streams, eventually solidifying into broad, gently textured plains. Dust has accumulated evenly across these plains, creating a surface so uniform that it feels almost like drifting over untouched snow. A thin layer of frost amplifies this impression, shimmering softly as you glide past. The stars overhead remain bright and steady. Phobos drifts across the sky again, making its second pass since the night began. Its small, irregular shape moves quickly but gently, like a floating pebble silhouetted against the stars. Its presence brings a quiet sense of companionship to the lonely desert. You watch its path, letting its swift but soundless movement soothe your thoughts. In the far distance, the land rises once more, forming a series of long, sloping ridges that appear almost black under the night sky. These ridges mark the edge of an ancient impact basin, one so old that its outline has been nearly erased by time and dust. The slopes are gentle. The curves are wide. The entire structure blends seamlessly into the rest of the highlands. As you drift toward it, the deep calm of the Martian night gathers around you like a soft, insulating cloak. Every breath you take feels quieter. Every thought drifts more slowly. Your awareness becomes light and steady, floating effortlessly above the ancient desert. Mars, Desert, Sleep, Ambience, Part 8, drifting through an ancient impact basin and the silent red winds of eons. The gentle ridges rise before you in long, sweeping arcs, marking the approach to the edge of the ancient impact basin. Though the basin's walls have been softened by billions of years of dust deposition and quiet erosion, you can still sense the monumental scale of the event that formed it. The land curves downward with broad, graceful slopes, as though the planet itself is bowing into a deep, peaceful breath. You drift toward the basin's lip, feeling the stillness intensify around you with each passing moment. The ground beneath you darkens into deep shades of brown and muted crimson, where frost has melted away from the warmth retained in the basin's ancient rocks. These tones blend slowly as the terrain curves downward, giving the impression of descending into a warm, quiet chamber hidden within the night. Above the basin, the stars shine brighter, unobstructed by dust or haze. The sky looks wider here, more open, as if inviting you to drift freely within its calm expanse. Your inhales widen gently with that openness. Your exhales fall deeper into the silence. As you cross the basin's rim, the slope becomes smoother, shaped over ages into a gentle descent. The dust here is finer than on the highlands, spreading across the surface like a soft layer of powder. Every ripple in the dust is subtle, almost imperceptible, shaped by winds so faint they might go unnoticed on Earth. These delicate formations guide your gaze downward, helping your awareness flow effortlessly into the center of the basin. Halfway down the slope, patterns appear in the dust, faint spirals and branching shapes, created by the slow movement of wind, curling around obstacles that once existed but have long since been covered. These ghost patterns stretch across the surface, like ancient memories preserved in sand. Their soft lines calm your eyes and draw your thoughts into smooth, relaxed loops. Farther into the descent, the frost begins to reappear in delicate patches that glisten faintly under the starlight. Some patches grow in thin sheets, while others form intricate crystalline clusters shaped by the basin's cooler air. Each cluster reflects the light in unique ways, like tiny frozen galaxies scattered across the ground. As you drift over them, they glow and fade softly, adding a rhythmic shimmer to the quiet desert night. The basin floor spreads wide and flat, a vast open area where everything feels slower and more serene. The dust becomes even finer here, forming a silky blanket of muted red and pale rose that stretches to the far horizon in a seamless sheet. Movement becomes minimal. Sound becomes non-existent. Even the thin Martian wind seems to hesitate before crossing this space, moving only in faint, whisper-like currents that barely disturb the surface. A cluster of large, rounded boulders lies near the center of the basin. These rocks were once fragments thrown from the impact that created this place, but time has softened them into smooth, gentle forms. Dust has piled against their bases in crescent shapes, creating small dunes that curve like half-moons in the starlight. Frost gathers along their sheltered edges, glowing faintly in silver arcs. The entire formation looks like a quiet assembly of ancient stones gathered for a silent night of rest. As you drift over the boulders, the faint breeze shifts direction, moving in a gentle circular pattern caused by the basin's shape. This circular airflow lifts small amounts of dust into slow, swirling motions, soft spirals of red and gold drifting through the air like weightless smoke. These spirals turn lazily, rising and falling without any urgency. Their motion is almost hypnotic, guiding your breath into long, smooth waves. Inhale as a spiral widens. Exhale as it drifts downward into the dust. At the far end of the basin floor, subtle ridges form where ancient sediments have settled in thin, layered sheets. These ridges are faint, but their repeating lines create a gentle pattern across the land. The frost highlights each ridge with a thin outline of silver, turning the basin floor into a calm landscape of soft geometry. Nothing abrupt, nothing sharp, just slow, quiet curves shaping the ground into a peaceful rhythm. You drift forward, following the natural flow of the ridges as they guide you toward a slightly elevated rise within the basin. This rise marks the central uplift, the point where deep rock rebounded upward after the impact. Now it stands as a soft hill coated in dust and faint frost, barely distinguishable except for the way the land curves. The slope is gentle, steady, comforting. Your movement along it feels like floating up, a slow, calm breath. From the top of the central rise, the entire basin expands outward in all directions. Its wide floor glows faintly under the starlight. Its slopes form smooth arcs leading back into the darkness. The silence is absolute. Even the faint wind seems to avoid this place, choosing instead to drift softly around its edges. This deep quiet settles into your awareness, softening your thoughts until they feel like they are drifting in the dust with the wind. As you begin to descend from the central rise, a new texture appears on the surface, thin fractures outlined in frost. These fractures form branching patterns, shallow, and delicate. They are created by thermal contraction as the ground cools rapidly during the night. Their pale outlines resemble veins of light, glowing under the stars like a soft network of silver threads woven into the land. Your mind follows their lines effortlessly, letting each branching path lead you deeper into calm. The basin narrows into a long, soft channel at its far edge. This channel once carried water cold, slow, and ancient, when Mars had a thicker atmosphere and warmer climate. Now it lies silent, filled with fine sediment and patches of frost. Its gently curving walls guide your drift, like the quiet banks of a dried river. You follow its path, feeling the tranquility deepen with each passing moment. At the channel's lowest point, dust has accumulated into a long, curved dune. This dune glows faintly under the night sky, its crest shimmering with frost that gathers where the air cools most quickly. The shape of the dune is smooth and elegant, a perfect wave frozen in time. You drift along its crest, feeling the soft curve. Ease your mind into an even deeper stillness. Ahead, the channel widens again, opening into another flat region where frost forms in thicker layers. Here, the ground appears almost white, a pale field of frozen dust stretching quietly under the stars. The frost reflects the sky faintly, creating a mirrored glow that blurs the boundary between land and night. Drifting above it feels like floating over a silent sea of cold light. Your breath slows further. Your thoughts loosen further. Your body drifts deeper into the quiet of the ancient desert. Mars Desert Sleep Ambience, Part 9, through silent dune fields and the dreamlike drift of Martian night air. The frost-covered plain stretches behind you as you drift gently into a region where dunes rise and fall in long, rhythmic waves across the desert. These dunes form some of the most graceful shapes on Mars, shaped not by powerful storms, but by the constant, whisper-soft movement of thin air brushing across the planet for millions of years. Their curves are smooth. Their crests are gentle. Their slopes seem to breathe with the night as the slightest breeze moves grains of dust in slow, shimmering flows. You glide toward them with the same unhurried pace, carried effortlessly by the soft pull of the planet's gravity. As you approach the first dune, its crest glows faintly under the starlight. A thin layer of frost gathers along the top, tracing the gentle arc in pale silver and icy blue. The crest looks like the edge of a frozen wave on a silent, Martian sea. The shadow on the dune's far side is deep but soft, spreading across the slope like a blanket of cool darkness. Your breathing falls naturally in sync with the rise and fall of these shapes. You drift low along the windward slope. The dust here is fine powder-like, and its texture smooths out even subtle ridges. Individual grains sparkle faintly where starlight catches them. The movement of the thin Martian breeze across the surface creates delicate ripples that shift almost too slowly for your eyes to follow. These ripples reflect the silent rhythm of the desert, a rhythm measured not in seconds or minutes, but in years and centuries. As you glide along the slope, a faint cloud of dust lifts beneath you. The particles rise gently, almost lazily, curling upward in a soft plume. They twist and drift in the air like smoke in slow motion, illuminated by the starlight in warm tones of deep red and golden rose. Their delicate motion feels like a lullaby for the eye's light, graceful, effortless, Your thoughts drift with them, loosening and lengthening into calm, fluid shapes. Reaching the top of the dune, the landscape opens into a wide field of rolling sand waves. Each dune is spaced evenly, forming a natural pattern shaped over ages. Some dunes are small, smooth mounds that rise only gently above the plain. Others are long ridges that stretch for kilometers, their spines glowing faintly. Where frost gathers along the coldest points, on Dan Barassa, lumens gather, and that Deans. All of them lie quiet and still under the Martian night sky. In the low wind, thin trickles of dust slide down the leeward slopes. The grains move in slow cascades, silent, soft, continuous. These tiny avalanches form faint streaks across the darker side of each dune, their motion subtle enough to lull your awareness deeper into rest. The dunes seem to shift with the night, but in truth, their movement is so slow that an entire lifetime would pass before their shapes changed in any dramatic way. You feel time stretching, slowing, smoothing itself across your thoughts. As you drift farther into the dune field, you reach a region where some sands are darker. These darker dunes are made of basalt grains, volcanic fragments broken down over millions of years. Under the starlight, they gleam with a muted metallic sheen, as though the ground itself holds a quiet, ancient memory of fire. The contrast between the dark basalt dunes and the lighter, rust-colored ones forms an unspoken harmony across the desert. You drift between these dunes, moving lightly like a shadow carried by the wind. A soft breeze brushes across the region now. You see its movement in thin ribbons of dust that rise from the dune crests and curl into the air. These ribbons widen and twist slowly, their shapes guided by temperature differences between the cold slopes and the slightly warmer valleys. The movement is graceful, like distant flames dancing in slow, silent cycles. You watch the ribbons drift outward and dissolve into the night, feeling your breath follow each curve. The temperature drops further, and frost begins to reappear across the dunes. At first, it forms in thin, delicate threads along the crests. Then, it spreads in widening patches across the windward sides, where the cold settles most deeply. The frost glows under the stars, giving the dunes a faint luminescence that makes them resemble frozen waves rolling through a sea of night. This glowing landscape calms your senses even more, inviting you to rest in its quiet beauty. You pass above a region where the dunes form a circular pattern, an unusual arrangement created by wind swirling around an ancient depression in the ground. The circular dune field looks like a vast, slow-turning spiral, frozen in place by time. Within the circle, the ground dips slightly, forming a quiet hollow filled with frost. The frost reflects the sky so clearly, it looks almost like a pool of frozen light. You drift above it gently, feeling your awareness deepen as though pulled softly toward its stillness. Beyond the spiral dunes, the terrain smooths out again, forming a broad plain that marks the transition into another ancient region of the desert. The plain glows faintly with frost, but its surface is more level, more open, less shaped by the restless winds. Here, the quiet feels even deeper. Even the faint red winds seem to pass over this plain in softer whispers. Your breath becomes nearly silent in your chest, matching the hush of the world around you. As you move toward the far edge of the dune field, you notice small rocks dotting the plain, each half buried in dust. These rocks cast long shadows, even under starlight. Some shadows blend into the dark ground. Others stretch into pale frost, creating gentle patterns of contrast. The stones look like markers left behind by ancient travelers, though no footsteps ever passed this way. Their quiet presence adds to the stillness of the night. The sky above remains clear, the stars bright and unwavering. Phobos makes another quick pass across the horizon. Moving so swiftly, it crosses a large portion of the sky in only minutes. Its presence adds a sense of gentle motion to the still world below, a reminder that even in silence, the Martian night is alive with quiet cycles. You watch the moon fade behind the distant dunes, leaving the desert in peaceful darkness once more. Beyond the small rocks, the surface shifts into a gentle slope leading upward. The rise is subtle, but steady. Thanks for watching. Guiding your path toward a region where ancient erosion has carved soft channels into the ground. These channels meander slowly across the plain, their edges muted by dust and frost. The channels resemble dried streams, though they carried only dust and perhaps thin films of ice, not liquid water for millions of years. Their gentle curves soothe your gaze as you drift above them. The slope ends at the foot of another dune ridge, taller and broader than the ones before. This ridge catches more frost, making its crest shine like a pale silver arc beneath the stars. The shadow on its far side is deep and velvety, a cool darkness that invites quiet introspection. You glide up the ridge slowly, rising with the terrain as if carried on a soft current of air. At the top, the view expands again. The night desert stretches endlessly in every direction. Dunes fade into plains. Plains fade into ridges. Ridges fade into distant, shadowed mountains. The whole world seems to rest beneath the calm dome of the sky, and you drift within it, light and silent, breathing in time with the slow pulse of a planet in deep slumber. Each breath becomes quieter. Each thought becomes softer. Each moment drifts gently into the next, like a grain of dust carried by the silent red winds. Mars Desert, Sleep Ambience Part 10, crossing the ancient dust channels and the quiet shadow valleys of the red planet. The tall dune ridge behind you fades into the darkness as you drift gently down its far side, descending into a region where the landscape has been shaped by long, winding dust channels carved over billions of years. These channels stretch across the desert in soft, branching pathways, their curves natural and fluid, like the memory of streams that never carried liquid water but were sculpted instead by the slow, persistent movement of fine sand. The ground here feels older still, as if the desert's quiet history is etched into every gentle bend of the terrain. You glide downward without effort, moving as smoothly as the dust once did through these winding paths. The channels are shallow but wide, spreading in directions that reflect ancient wind patterns. Some sections run straight for long distances. Others twist like soft ribbons, curving around boulders or rising slightly where the ground shifted over time. The patterns are soothing, like a natural labyrinth created not to confuse, but to calm the wandering mind. As you follow one of these channels, your thoughts begin to mirror its gentle path, drifting slowly and smoothly from one quiet idea to the next. Frost has settled in the deepest parts of these channels, forming thin, shining strips along the valley floors. These strips glow softly in faint tones of silver blue, reflecting the cold starlight overhead. Their narrow shapes create a gentle visual rhythm, bright, dark, bright, dark as they weave through the desert. You drift above them at a slow, steady pace, allowing the alternating light and shadow to guide your awareness deeper into rest. On the channel walls, fine ripples formed by countless nights of subtle wind movement extend upward in delicate patterns. Each ripple is small, a few centimeters high, but they stretch for many meters, giving the slopes a soft, textured appearance. The ripples mimic the look of waves on a calm sea, frozen into sand and dust by the cold Martian air. You drift close enough to see the frost glimmering softly in the troughs, its presence adding a gentle sparkle to the night. These tiny points of light appear and disappear as you move, like stars reflected in a shifting pool. Farther along the channel, thin puffs of dust rise gently where the wind brushes against the slopes. The dust rises slowly, forming small clouds that drift upward before dispersing into the night air. Their movement is quiet and fluid, like the breath of the desert. You watch as these soft clouds expand and fade, feeling your own breath widen and release in the same rhythm. As you follow the channel deeper into the landscape, the walls begin to rise slightly, forming narrow, shadowed corridors. The darkness here grows thicker, absorbing sound and light until the world around you feels like a sanctuary carved entirely from silence. Only the faint glimmer of frost remains, outlining the edges of the walls in thin, glowing lines. Their presence provides just enough light to guide your path, though the calm darkness invites your awareness to soften further, to rest more deeply. The channel eventually opens into a secluded basin, a quiet hollow formed by ancient wind erosion. Frost coats the center of the basin in a smooth, pale sheet that glows softly as you drift above it. The ground around the frost patch is darker, forming a gentle ring that contrasts beautifully with the light. The effect makes the basin resemble a shallow bowl filled with frozen moonlight. Your breathing becomes slower as you float across this serene space. From the basin, the terrain rises again into low, rounded hills. The dust here is thicker, forming soft, undulating layers that blanket the ground like powdery snow. Each hill is coated in a thin film of frost, giving them a faint, shimmering glow when viewed from above. The shapes of the hills are gentle and smooth, their curves echoing the natural rhythm of the desert night. You drift upward with the rise of the land, your movement as light and effortless as the flow of the cold wind through the dust. Beyond the hills, the landscape widens into a flat, open expanse. The ground darkens again, indicating areas of ancient volcanic plains. These plains are smoother and harder beneath the dust, formed from ancient lava flows that have cooled and settled over billions of years. Their surfaces are etched with long, subtle cracks created by thermal contraction during frigid nights like this one. Frost gathers inside these cracks, glowing softly, like thin lines of silver traced across the plain. From above, the cracks form a calm mosaic of geometric shapes. You drift across them, slowly, letting the patterns ease your awareness into deeper tranquility. In the distance, a faint dust devil forms a small, slow-spinning column of fine red grains lifted into the air by shifting temperature differences. unlike the tall, twisting dust devils found on warmer days. This night cyclone is gentle and calm. The dust rises only a few meters, moving in soft circles that shimmer under the stars. You drift past it quietly, watching its slow motion, like a candle flame turning with no wind. Its presence adds a sense of subtle motion to the otherwise still world. Beyond the plain, a narrow valley appears. Its slopes are covered in a thick layer of dust that smooths out every contour, giving the valley a soft, padded appearance. Frost gathers more heavily here, creating white streaks that run along the slopes like gentle brushstrokes. The frost seems to glow from within, illuminating the valley in a cool, serene light. You drift into the valley, feeling your body relax further as the world grows even quieter. Inside the valley, the air feels slightly stiller, even though nothing can be heard. The dust hangs in tiny suspended particles near the surface, shimmering like faint fireflies when starlight catches them. These tiny specks drift slowly, rising and falling with slight temperature fluctuations. Their soft, random motion creates a calming randomness, no pattern, no urgency, just quiet drifting. At the far end of the valley, the terrain rises into jagged formations. These are ancient rock outcrops, older than the dunes, older than the plains, older than the dust itself. Their surfaces are rough and fractured, though softened by layers of fine sediment. Frost settles into their cracks and crevices, turning each fracture line into a glowing thread. The combined effect resembles gentle veins of light running through the stone. You drift above these outcrops with reverence, sensing the deep time resting within their silent forms. As you leave the valley, the landscape opens once more, revealing a wide plateau shaped by slow, ancient uplift. The plateau's surface is covered in fine dust that moves subtly with the night breeze. In some places, the dust gathers into thin ridges known as windtails, which form behind rocks and small obstacles. These windtails stretch in long, delicate lines that mark the direction of the faint breeze. Their presence adds soothing guidance to your drifting path. Frost thickens again along the edges of the plateau, especially where the dust cools most quickly. The frost glows softly in the dim light, creating a misty, luminous border between the plateau and the surrounding lower terrain. You drift along this glowing edge, following its gentle curve across the night. Above you, the stars seem brighter than before, sharp, steady, unmoving. Their light feels clean and cold, perfectly in harmony with the silent desert. You breathe deeply, letting the night settle into your chest like a cool, quiet tide. Each moment stretches gently. Each thought fades softly. You drift deeper into the desert, carried on the silent red winds of a world at rest. And now, as the quiet Martian night settles fully around you, you drift above the red desert in a calm deeper than memory. The dunes rest in soft curves beneath the stars. The frost glows faintly along the quiet slopes, and the thin, whispering winds of Mars move gently across the ancient ground, carrying the slow breath of a planet that has slept in silence for billions of years. You have crossed frozen plains. You have floated through shadowed valleys. You have drifted over dune fields shaped by winds older than human history. And through it all, You have moved in a quiet rhythm, calm, steady, and weightless. Now, the red desert stretches behind you like a fading dream. The cold horizon glows with a thin silver line where the morning will someday rise. But for now, the night holds everything in stillness. Here, in this silence, you no longer need to think. You no longer need to hold on to the day. You no longer need to stay awake. Let the ancient calm of Mars gather around you. Let the soft red winds guide your breath. Let the deep, cold, quiet smooth your thoughts into slow, gentle shapes. You are safe. You are warm. You are held not by noise, not by movement, but by the vast and gentle stillness of a sleeping world. Let that stillness wrap around your body like a soft blanket of night. And 4, let your thoughts drift downward like dust settling onto quiet sand. Let your eyelids grow heavy as the winds fade into silence. Sleep arrives here naturally, softly, slowly, like dawn, taking its time to rise over the red horizon. There is no need to resist it, no need to guide it. Simply let yourself fall into it, as gently as dust returning to the ground. Thank you for drifting with us across the ancient deserts of Mars tonight. This is Science Sleep, where quiet curiosity meets peaceful rest. Good night.